Raymond, the man I worked for 12 years, died in his bedroom on a warm summer morning. I knew I wouldn't find a better job because I wouldn't find a better employer. He was a millionaire, but at heart he was always human. I looked after him as I would have looked after my own father if I had one. He had millions, but he was truly lonely. His friends only visited him to borrow a little money that no one was going to give back. He wasn't married, but he had an illegitimate daughter. Or rather, he knew about her existence, searched for her, and until his last days he couldn't accept that he had pushed her mother away when she showed up on his doorstep. I was so young. I was afraid of relationships, afraid that I wouldn't know what to do with a child. I wrote her a check for a tidy sum and closed the door on her. There were many women in my life after her, but I never found one like her. He was to be cremated the next day. I took my last check from the table in his office, cleaned up his bedroom. When the lawyer came into the house to collect the deceased documents and announce his will to his friends and colleagues, he called me into his office. Everyone looked around and didn't understand what a cleaning lady was doing among the rich. His associate and longtime partner, Ellen, looked at me askance and showed me all her contempt. Lawyer Hunter sat me down at the table next to him. He read out which of Raymond's possessions would now belong to whom. They rubbed their hands with pleasure and rejoiced like children, although his body had not yet had time to cool down. He lay in the coffin, and they only thought about who would now be on the throne instead of him. Raymond wants you to meet the new owner of his empire. I am pleased to introduce you to Dayla Baker, the lawyer said. I thought I heard my name, but it was really it. He gave me everything. For what? Why such generosity? My heart was jumping out of my chest. The lawyer put an envelope in front of me. I opened it and saw, "Hello, daughter. I only found out a week ago that you are the daughter I gave up almost 60 years ago. If you're wondering what a 58-year-old woman does when the floor of her life drops out from under her, you're listening to her. I'm Dayla, the kind of woman people confuse for soft because I pour coffee with a smile. The mistake is understandable. When you survive a desert, you learn to ration your water. That doesn't make you weak. It makes you dangerous in a drought. I didn't start my life in a mansion. I started it with a suitcase that had one busted wheel and a careful optimism the size of a teabag. At 46, my husband left me for a girl who called me ma'am and wore sneakers that cost more than our rent. He took his cologne and the good towels. The silence he left behind echoed through the little duplex like a bad joke. My son, grown and newly married, invited me to stay for a bit while I got on my feet. Translation: I would change their babies' diapers, scrub their casserole dishes, and learn that gratitude can be weaponized. My daughter-in-law, a real poster child for entitlement with a manicure. She'd open my spice cabinet like it owed her money and inform me that real home cooks don't use pre-ground pepper. I would have told her real home cooks don't roll their eyes at the woman buying the groceries. But my son had asked me, "Please, Mom, keep the peace." So I kept the peace while she salted it. The last straw came the night she called me a wet blanket with opinions. I'd set out dinner, my pot roast that can make a grown man cry, and she wrinkled her little nose and ordered Thai on her phone while I was slicing carrots. When the delivery came, she told the driver to just walk in because it's basically your house too. I stood there with a ladle in my hand and a choke of laughter in my throat. Basically my house too. That night I folded my life back into the suitcase with the busted wheel and decided I wanted walls that listened only to me. A staffing agency had an opening. Live-in housekeeper and companion for an elderly client. You'll have your own room and bathroom, the woman on the phone said like she was describing a penthouse. He's particular, she added. Aren't we all? I said. 2 days later, a black sedan pulled up, and a driver with a temple of carefully placed gray hair stepped out. Miss Baker? He asked. That's me, I said, and he took my suitcase like it contained something delicate. The house was a mansion that tried not to be. No gold toilets. No marble lions, just clean lines, old trees, and a front door that opened with a gentle sigh, as if relieved you'd arrived. The man inside was Raymond, 70, iron-backed, eyes like a winter late. You're late, he said, and I checked the clock. I wasn't. I prefer people early, he added. Then we're both disappointed, I told him. He stared at me for a long moment, then laughed once, a short, surprised sound, like a dog bark in a church. My duties were simple on paper. Meals, meds, conversation. In practice, I wrangled the house like a ship and kept its captain from sinking into that cold lake behind his eyes. He pretended to hate my soups. He ate to bowls. He told me my music was too sentimental. He left his office door ajar when I hummed Ella in the kitchen. We learned each other's rhythms like neighbors separated by a thin wall. At first, he was grumpy, of course. Old men with money think irritation is a personality. I let him keep it. What do I care what mask a man wears at breakfast? But I insisted on 2 house rules. I cook what I cook, and we speak plain. I told him I could spend my days being agreeable or useful, but not both. He chose useful. Smart man. The people orbiting him were less charming. Ellen, his longtime partner, wore lipstick like a battle stripe and treated me the way people treat chairs they plan to royfulster, possessive, dismissive, already imagining my replacement. She would glide through the kitchen, fingers grazing my counters, and murmur, "We so appreciate your help," the way you murmur to the maid at the hotel you're about to check out of without tipping. I saw how she angled her body when she spoke to Raymond, head titled toward his ear, whisper smiling like a nurse in a war ward. She brought him deals that smelled like gasoline and asked him to strike matches. Then there were the friends, men with watches that could refinance a house and jokes that could ruin a marriage. They arrived with bottles and left with promises. They spoke a language made of winks and decimal points, and I took notes while I poured wine, because a woman who takes notes never loses an argument. One night, a storm cracked the sky open, and the lights blinked. The generator kicked and Raymond planned for everything, but his hand shook just enough that I saw the truth. Behind the myth of the man, there was a son someone had once left on a doorstep and a father he never got to be. I made cocoa like you would for a stubborn child who refuses to sleep and said, "Tell me the worst thing you ever did." He looked at me like I'd asked him to sign over his soul. Then he told me about a woman at a door, and a check, and a choice he never forgave himself for. He never said the word daughter. He didn't have to. Regret has a shape. You recognize it when you've worn it yourself. After that, he let me in the way old houses let in spring, a crack at a time, until the rooms are different and you don't remember when they changed. He trusted me with his medicines and eventually, with his mornings. I brought him the newspaper and the truth. This article slants the numbers, I'd say. This deal is lipstick on a bulldog, I'd say, and he'd grunt, which in Raymond meant keep talking. I had a degree once upon a life business, before a baby, before a marriage that took that degree and filed it under someday. You don't forget how to see. You just forget that you're allowed to say what you see out loud. Ellen did not take kindly to my mouth. "It's not your place," she told me by the pantry, voice soft, fingers sharp on a crystal glass. "You clean, you cook, leave strategy to the grown-ups." "Good news," I said. "I eat my vegetables." She blinked. I smiled. That was the day she began to hate me properly. The little betrayals grew legs. A vendor shorted a shipment, and the invoice claimed full delivery. A portfolio manager misunderstood an allocation and parked money with a buddies fund whose performance chart looked like a ski slope going the wrong way. I did what women like me do best. I tittied. Quietly, politely, effectively. I built spreadsheets with teeth. I layered passwords like clothes in January. When they tried to talk around me, I drew a chair up to the table and wrote the minutes myself. Raymond didn't say thank you. He didn't have to. He stopped looking tired. We developed a ritual. After dinner, 1 glass of wine each, conversation like tennis. He'd lob a memory. I'd return a story. He'd test me with a scenario. I'd answer with a question he hadn't thought to ask. He taught me what he knew about leverage, financial and otherwise. I taught him what I knew about human leverage, where to press when a man is pretending not to feel. Somewhere in those evenings, our roles shifted. I was still his housekeeper, but he began calling me captain. I told him not to. He said, "Ships don't sail themselves. 12 years slip the way good years do quietly, while you're busy choosing joy over drama and service over self-pity." Then, this summer morning, he didn't wake up. He'd spent the evening before in his chair, wine untouched, eyes on the window as if he expected someone from the past to walk up the drive and forgive him. I found him with the sunrise. I closed his eyes with my fingers and my gratitude with my teeth. I'd lost many things in my life, but losing that man felt like losing the one person who had seen me not as a helper but as a force. By noon, the house filled with the sound of expensive grief. The florist delivered arrangements that smelled like bank lobbies. Men in navy suits shook one another's hands as if they'd won something, and perhaps they thought they had. Ellen wore black that looked joyous on her, and I suppose in a way it was. Some women look their best at other people's funerals. Then came Hunter the lawyer with a face like a closed briefcase and eyes that still knew how to be kind. He asked me to sit. People whispered. I watched their mouths shape my name like it was a mistake. He read the will, names, bequests, smiles you could hear, then my name, and the hush that followed was the kind of silence you get right before a confession or a car crash. He slid me the envelope. I opened it. Hello, daughter. The room tilted. Daughter. The word felt impossible and inevitable at the same time, like rain at a picnic you forgot to check the forecast for. I thought of my mother, gone now, who had never told me the identity of the man who left us with a good cheekbone and bad timing. I thought of the check that might have changed her life and how she'd lit cigarettes with it instead. I thought of the tenderness a gruff man had been practicing with me for 12 years and how it hadn't been practice at all. It had been memory working its way home. Ellen spoke first. Of course she did. This must be a mistake, she said, voice smooth as theft. Raymond was a sentimental man. He would never hand control to. She didn't finish. But the word she didn't choose was cleaner than the one she wanted. Hunter lifted a palm. It's not a mistake, he said, and the finality in his tone made even the ferns quiet. The documents are airtight. My phone trembled in my pocket. My son, a name I hadn't seen on my lock screen in months. It figured. Wealth has a smell and telepathy for those who need to borrow it. I silenced the call. The room watched me learning how to breathe again. Hunter leaned close and said softly, "We'll go slow. I'll help you." In that moment, the kindness in those words felt less like consolation and more like a key. I stood. "Thank you, all, for coming," I said, and the crowd looked at me like a museum guard who'd stepped between them and a painting. You loved him in your ways. I loved him in mine. He built this house. I kept it standing. A murmur. The kind people make when they realize the maid has a voice. If you were his friend, you're welcome to write your memories for the family record we'll keep here. If you were his creditor, I let my eyes rest on two men who suddenly remembered an appointment. Hunter will schedule a meeting. If you were his partner and you think I don't know where the bodies are buried, bless your confidence. Someone laughed. It might have been me. After they'd left, the house went back to being a house, not a stage. I took the envelope to the kitchen because big news sits better in rooms that know your footsteps. The letter was short. Guilt is verbose but love writes tight. He had known for a week. A week. He'd spent those evenings staring at the window because he'd been looking for the past shaped like me. He left me the company, the house, the headaches, and apparently, a long list of people who believed I'd roll over and purr. I poured myself a glass of cold water and looked out at the lawn where Raymond had once pretended not to enjoy my 4th of July sparklers. All right, I told the grass and the ghosts. Let's go to war politely. The phone lit again. My son. I let it ring out. Then a text came from an unknown number. Ellen, coffee tomorrow? We should talk about continuity. Continuity, my favorite euphemism for a coup. I smiled, typed back, of course, and set my alarm for early because the first battle in any war is fought against your nerves. Before I slept, I walked through the house, touching the banister, the door frames, the silver tray with the nick I'd never polished out because flaws proved the object lived. I ended in the office where the decisions had always been made by men with cufflinks. I pulled out a fresh legal pad, wrote Dayla across the top, and underlined it twice. Then I made 3 columns. What I know, what I don't, what they think I don't. By the time the moon leaned against the window, I had a plan good enough to scare me and simple enough to execute. I would listen more than I spoke. I would move numbers like chess pieces. I would apply the business mind I'd packed away when a baby put his fist around my finger and my dreams, and I would not apologize for using it now. At midnight, I finally picked up my son's voicemail. His voice started cautious, moved swiftly to warm, and then landed where I knew it would. We should reconnect, Mom. The kids want to meet you. Maybe we can come by. We're so happy for you. He hadn't been happy for me when I could have used a birthday call. Funny how love grows legs when it hears there's a trust fund to chase. I deleted the message. Not yet. I told the phone, the house, and the woman in the hall mirror who had been mistaken for gentle one day too long. First things first. Tomorrow, I would meet Hunter at 9, Ellen at 10, the staff at 11, and the past at noon. By evening, the vultures would learn that the cleaning lady knew where the bones were because she'd been the one burying them perfectly spaced, labeled, and ready for exhumation. And somewhere between breakfast and the meeting with Ellen's smile, I would decide how to answer my son. I wouldn't wait for justice to knock politely. I'd crack the door, smile, and bring her in myself. I woke before the sun and brewed coffee strong enough to take varnish off a chair. My hands moved the way they had every morning for 12 years, but the house listened differently. It knew I wasn't just warming plates. I was warming engines. I put on a navy dress, not morning black, not victory red, and a pair of flats that said I came to stand a long time. At 9 sharp, Hunter arrived with a leather folio and the face of a man who keeps promises in alphabetical order. We took the corner of the dining table Raymond liked best, the spot where the light softened the truth just enough to hear it. He opened the folio. "Congratulations," he said in a tone that respected grief enough not to smile. "And condolences. Both are true." "I prefer facts to sympathy," I said. "Sympathy is for funerals. Facts are for the days after." "Then here are facts. You hold controlling interest in the holding company. 2 subsidiaries are healthy. 1 is anemic but promising. There's a pending real estate deal I don't like, a cash position I do, and 2 partners I would not turn my back on in a dark room." "Ellen," I said. "And Peretti," he added, tapping a page. "He's charming and always overdrawn on money, patience, and favors. He and Ellen sponsored that fund you flagged last year for Raymond. He didn't move the money. He told me he preferred to sit in cash while the storm blows over," I said, remembering the way he'd lifted his glass like a lighthouse beacon. He liked the phrase so much he said it twice. Hunter smiled without showing teeth. "I like you sitting where you are. I clean my own messes," I said. "But I don't mind a witness." He ran me through the paper bones of the empire, the flow of money, the backs of napkins that had become contracts, the businesses Raymond had rescued for the joy of proving gravity wrong. I took notes like I always had: neat columns, arrows only when absolutely necessary, stars for landmines. Hunter paused at the page labeled board. "The board isn't large, but it's loyal to what was, not to what will be," he said. "Ellen will call for an emergency session as soon as she has a quorum. She texted me for coffee," I said. I said yes. "Good." He slid me a slim folder. "Read this before you go. It's a recap of the last 3 quarters with my annotations. I've flagged a pattern, small deviations that add up to a large story. If you're patient, you can make people tell on themselves." "I'm patient like a storm cloud," I said. "I hang until I'm heavy enough to ruin a picnic." He laughed. "Then a real thing, quick and warm." "Raymond liked your metaphors," he said. "He kept a list." "You're lying. Check the 3rd drawer in the desk." Later, when he was gone, I did. Inside lay an index card with my name. Under it entries: Dayla isms. Ships don't sail themselves. Old men with money think irritation is a personality. Patience like a storm cloud. I put the card back and closed the drawer because sometimes sentiment is a throat you can't clear. At 10, Ellen arrived with a scarf the color of good champagne and sunglasses she didn't remove, despite being indoors. Her smile pivoted on its hinge when she saw I'd chosen the kitchen instead of the little sunroom where people go to be managed. "Coffee?" I asked, holding up the pot. "Espresso," she said, settling on a stool as if it might spring at her. "Double." I poured regular coffee into a white cup because we weren't negotiating about appliances this morning. "So," she began, wrapping her fingers around the cup like it might read her fortune. "This is unexpected. I've found that the most efficient path to honesty is when a woman says, 'So cute,'" she said. "Here's my so continuity." Raymond was a stabilizing presence in a volatile market. Investors hate surprises. We need to reassure everyone that leadership remains consistent. "I can serve as interim CEO while you, settle in, while I learn to use the microwave?" I asked. "Or the company jet? Which dial do you think confuses me more?" Her mouth twitched. "A good opponent appreciates a good line even as she plots your demise." "No one thinks you're incapable, Dayla. We simply think you're fresh." "Fresh is how food stays edible," I said. "Stale bread cuts your gums." She set the cup down with care. "You don't know what it is to stand in front of a room full of men who've done this for decades. They smell nerves." "I do know," I said. "I just had a cleaner job title when I did it. They called me dear and asked me to fetch more water while I fetched their red flags. I'm done serving drinks to men who aren't thirsty." She inhaled. A flash of something: respect, annoyance, passed through her eyes like a weather front. "Then you'll want my list," she said, sliding a paper across the island. "Vendors, clients, landmines. Whether you like me or not, I've kept this ship off the rocks. Say out loud that you know it." "You mean, validate your narrative before you stick a knife between my ribs," I said, but I took the paper because information is never your enemy. "It's your mirror." "Thank you." I cared about him, she said suddenly, as if the admission had been courting her and she'd finally decided to say yes. Not your way, my way. I was there at 3 a.m. when the capital call came in, at noon when the regulator wanted to make an example of us, and at 4 when he thought he didn't deserve the next breath. I know, I said. And I know what you did when he was too tired to proof columns. She stood, surprised. What did I do? You moved decimals like furniture, I said softly. Not theft sloppiness. Reallocation without a note. You let Peretti sell him a bridge and then you stood on it waving people across while you knew the supports were rotten. She reached for indignation but came up with nothing but a shaky exhale. You can't prove, Ellen, I said kindly, because kindness can be the gentlest lever. You don't fool me. That's why you dislike me so much. You recognize your reflection. She stared. Then she did me the courtesy of honesty. I'll call the board, she said. We'll see what you are in a room with people who think numbers are a language. I think people are, I replied. Numbers just tell on them. She left her cup half full, which I took as a sign from the universe that I was meant to drink it. Waste offends me more than malice. Malice I can use. At 11, the staff gathered in the dining room. Maria from laundry, Jorge from maintenance, Tamsin from the garden, Evan the night security who likes crosswords and wears socks with space rockets. They looked at me like students waiting to hear if their favorite class would be canceled. I'm not bringing in a new crew, I said before their nerves gathered. If you've worked here with pride, you work here still. If you've stolen so much as a lemon from the pantry, return it to the bowl and we'll make lemonade. But the games stop. The petty pilfering of time and anything with a barcode? Over. We're professionals. We will act like it. In return, you'll have raises in 6 months if the numbers justify them. And they will justify them, because I'll make sure the numbers tell the truth. Maria crossed herself. Dios la bendiga, she whispered. I'll take all the blessings, I said. I intend to need them. After, in the quiet, I went to the office and pulled the 10-read files I used to dust. They opened for me like old friends who knew I now had a secret. In the top drawer lay the list I had made in pencil over the years, the names of people who had asked for more than they gave, who smiled with all their teeth, who left with silver in their pockets. I sharpened the pencil. I added 2 names. Then I circled one, Peretti. Flashback found me like it always does, a memory picking its time. It set me down 3 years earlier at a charity gala where gold floated in the air like pollen. Raymond stood with Peretti and a man in a velvet jacket who laughed the way rich men practice in mirrors. Peretti was pitching a special opportunity, the kind that expires if you blink. It's a bridge round, he said. 6 months, 12%, convertible at a favorable cap, practically guaranteed. I watched Raymond's hand flex toward his wallet, and I stepped in with a tray of canapés I had no intention of offering. Sir, I said to the velvet man as if I had just now registered his existence, you gave me this card for the parking valet. We don't have one tonight. I showed him a blank white card. He blinked. Raymond blinked. The spell blinked. Later, in the car, Raymond said, what did you see? I told him I'd seen a man who called returns before the ink dried and a partner who loved the old music of leverage more than the new math of discipline. He didn't invest. 6 months later, the bridge collapsed and names were dragged through the water. He sent me flowers with a card that read, the ship sails better when the navigator won't flirt with the rocks. I pressed the flowers in a book called Risk Management, not because I'm sentimental but because I like irony where I can find it. Back in the present. Hunter texted, board meeting at PM conference room A. Brace yourself. I texted back, I don't brace, I balance. He replied with a thumbs up that somehow felt like a psalm. At 2, my son called again. I picked up because avoidance is its own kind of cowardice, and if I meant to wage a war, I needed to train my voice not to shake. Mom, he said, words coated in honey he borrowed from a beehive not his. I've been thinking about you. We all have. We? I asked. Me, and the kids, he said, tripping over the plural like it had just grown in his mouth. They want to meet their grandmother. Oh, now I'm a noun you're not ashamed of, I said. Last time we spoke you told me to get out of your life. Said my bad temper would end your marriage. I was angry, he said quickly. Overwhelmed. I was wrong. You were young, I allowed. And you learned the convenient script? Blame the woman who won't be silent. Did it save your marriage? There was a long pause. No, he admitted softly. It didn't. I'm sorry for that, I said, and I meant it. But I won't be your ladder to climb out of your mistakes. Not today. I just want to see you, he said, small now, the way he used to sound when he'd skinned a knee and tried not to cry. And for you to see them. You want access, I said, to me, to this house, to the idea of money. You want to stand in my light and catch the warmth. Here is my answer for today. No, not until you can look at me and see a woman, not a wallet. Write me a letter, in your own hand, no texts. Tell me who your children are, not their birthdays, their selves. Tell me a mistake you made that you don't forgive yourself for. When I believe you know how to be honest without an audience, I'll consider a visit. He started to protest, then stopped. Okay, he said. Okay. I don't hate you, I said. But I love myself more than I love the idea of us. That's new. Get used to it. When I hung up, I cried for 7 minutes because I ration even tears, and then I washed my face and put on lip balm like armor. The clock glared 4:27 at me. I gathered the folder Hunter had given and the list Ellen had slid across my island like a peace offering disguising itself as a threat. On the way out, I passed Raymond's portrait in the hall, the one he pretended to hate. You're late, I told him. You should have told me sooner. His eyes stayed wry. I took that as a blessing. Conference room sat at the top of the office tower like a crown, glass and light, and a table long enough to seat a small revolution. The board filtered in. They avoided my eyes the way people avoid the gaze of a street preacher, and for similar reasons. Fear of recognizing themselves in the sermon. Hunter sat at my right. On my left, an empty chair where I put the slim folder and my pen. Ellen called the meeting to order with a brightness that grated. As you all know, she smiled like a news anchor telling you the weather will ruin your wedding. We're here to discuss leadership continuity. She gestured to me, the flourish of a magician presenting a volunteer he intends to saw in half. Before we do continuity, I said, let's do clarity. I've read the last 3 quarters. I see a pattern, small, repeated deviations. Tiny percentages shifted like sand. I've circled the names attached. Ellen opened her mouth. I put up a finger, and I brought the man who will explain it better than I can. Jorge. Jorge stepped in wearing his maintenance uniform and the expression of a person who knows he has not been invited but is not leaving. He carried a box. Inside, old hard drives, a stack of labeled thumbsticks, a ledger with a cracked spine. Jorge, Ellen said, scandalized, as if I'd brought the gardener to tip champagne on their paperwork. Jorge is a former systems analyst, I said. He took this job to make a steady living for his family. He also knows what a breadcrumb looks like when someone doesn't want to be found. I nodded at him. Show them. Jorge plugged in a drive and projected a chart, a series of micro movements, decimal dust shifting from one account to another through a sequence of vendors that had the names of shell companies who loved islands. I watched the color drain from Peretti's face like a tide escorting secrets. It's all small, Jorge said gently, because he is a kind man with a good heart. But small grows, like mold, I added. You don't notice it until you can smell it. The room erupted into the kind of noise that follows an uninvited truth. Hunter waited, then tapped the table with a pen. Proposals? He asked, voice dry. Interim suspension of discretionary transfers, I said. Immediate third-party audit. Freeze on the Peretti Fund. And a vote to confirm me as CEO for a 90-day review. You don't have the experience, someone protested. I have the receipts, I said, tapping the box. And the will. For now, that's enough. Ellen smiled then, slow and razor thin. And what will you do, Dayla, if we say no? I returned her smile with interest. I'll do what women like me have always done, I said. I'll take the floor anyway. I reached into the box and held up the ledger with the cracked spine. It wasn't finance. It was Raymond's handwriting. Dates, decisions, a column he'd titled Conscience where he'd written things like call her back and apologize to Jay. Over a week ago, the last line read, tell Dayla the thing I should have told her long ago. Beneath that, a shaky arrow pointing at my name. The room went quiet. Men will argue with numbers. They hesitate to argue with ghosts. Shall we vote? Hunter asked, eyes on the clock. Hands rose, some reluctantly, some with relief. Peretti's didn't. He looked at Ellen, but she was studying the table as if it might tell her a new story. The motion passed. 90 days. A breath, a blade, a promise. As we stood, my phone buzzed. An email from an unknown address popped onto the screen. Subject, your father wasn't the only one with secrets. I opened it. 3 photos loaded, each more impossible than the last. The first, Raymond at 30, arm around a woman I'd never seen who wore a smile like a challenge. The second, The same woman in front of a small shop with a sign that read Baker's Bread, my mother's maiden name, not her married one. The third, a baby with hair thick as a question. Under the pictures, a single line. If you want the story, come alone. I looked up at the glass city around me. The war had just acquired a new front. I didn't go home that night. I drove out past the glowing skyline, out where the road forgot to be polished and the trees started remembering secrets. The air smelled of damp pine and distance. Hunter had called 3 times. I didn't answer. I needed silence, and silence rarely lives in the city. The photos haunted the passenger seat. I'd tuck them into the sun visor, like I could fold the truth into a paper crane and keep it from flying at my face. The woman in the photo, my mother, the name on the sign Baker's Bread, that couldn't be coincidence. But my mother never owned a bakery. She was a nurse, long hours, neat hands, quiet voice. That was the story she told, and like any obedient daughter, I never questioned a good lie. I parked by a diner with a neon sign that hummed like a bug zapper and ordered coffee that could strip paint. The waitress called me Han, which was the first kindness I'd had all day. She had a tattoo of a tulip on her wrist and a face that said she'd seen every kind of trouble twice. You look like you're running from or to something, she said, setting down the mug. Both, I said. Depends on the mile marker. She laughed. Ain't that the truth? I nursed the coffee until the sun dipped and the world turned copper. I pulled the photos out again. The third one, the baby had a smudge on the corner, a thumbprint maybe. My thumbprint? My mother's? I couldn't tell. What I could tell was that I'd been lied to by 2 parents, one by omission, the other by convenience. The email had been sent from a dead account. No reply possible. But there'd been metadata in the header, a location tag. Small town 2 hours north, Silver Cross. I started the car. Silver Cross looked like every American town that used to matter before the freeway decided to take a different route. One main street, a hardware store that smelled of old oil and pride, and a row of shops that still displayed faded signs: florist, barber, bakery. The bakery's sign was half gone, Baker's Bread, but the rest matched the photo. Inside it was empty except for a glass case of pastries that looked like they'd been baked that morning and forgotten at noon. Behind the counter stood a woman maybe in her 30s, curly hair tied in a red scarf, face too alive for this sleepy town. Help you? She asked. I'm looking for whoever owns this place, I said. She smiled, guarded. That'd be me. You're a baker? Sure am. Mandy Baker. My grandmother started this shop back in the 60s. Why? I took a breath. Do you happen to know who this is? I slid the photo across the counter, the one of Raymond and the woman in front of the bakery. Her eyes widened. Well, I'll be damned. That's my grandma, Evelyn Baker. And that man, she pointed, isn't he that business guy who died recently? The one on the news? That's right, I said softly. Raymond. She tilted her head. You knew him? I did, I said. Better than I thought. She leaned on the counter, curiosity bright as sugar. My grandma used to tell stories about a man like him. Said he came through town with a briefcase and a grin too sharp for his own good. They had a thing, I think. Real whirlwind. Then he vanished. She said he left her with more than memories. My pulse hammered. More, yeah. Mandy smiled wistfully. She got pregnant. Had a little girl. My mom, Mary? The floor tilted under me. Your mom, Mary Baker? That's her. I could hear Raymond's voice from the letter. I only found out a week ago that you are the daughter I gave up. If Evelyn was his lover and Mary was her daughter, then Mary, my mother, had lied about everything except her name. I'm sorry, I said, my throat tight. I think we're family. Her eyes went wide. Then she laughed. Lady, I've had some weird customers, but that takes the cake. I can prove it. I took out the envelope from Raymond's will, the signature, the DNA results Hunter had ordered for verification, one of the many legal steps required for the inheritance. I laid it on the counter. He found me before he died. I'm Dayla Baker, his daughter. She stared, the laughter slipping away like steam. Then, that makes you your aunt. The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the clock tick behind her. Well, holy hell, she said finally, blinking fast. You want a cinnamon roll? I laughed despite myself. Yes, I do. We sat in the back room, sugar between us. She brought out an old showbox filled with photos, her mother, her grandmother, scraps of a story that had waited decades for someone to finish it. They kept the bakery going through everything, she said. When my grandma died, my mom tried to sell, but the town wouldn't let her. Said this place was Silver Cross's heart. She stayed until the cancer got bad. After she passed, I couldn't leave it either. I studied a faded photo of Evelyn, my grandmother, with flower on her cheek and joy in her eyes. I could see it now, the spark Raymond had carried in his chest all his life, the one I'd mistaken for ambition. It wasn't ambition. It was grief trying to build something that looked like redemption. I think he wanted to make it right, I said. He just ran out of time. Mandy nodded. That's the thing about men like him. They think there's always more time until there isn't. She poured more coffee. What are you gonna do about it? What do you mean? You found out who you really are, she said. So what's next? You gonna sell his empire? Keep it? Run it? I'm running it, I said without hesitation. And I'm cleaning house. Her grin turned wicked. Good. The Bakers I know don't sit back and cry. We fix what's broken and make whoever broke it regret they didn't hire us sooner. I liked her instantly. When I drove back that night, the city lights didn't look the same. They looked smaller. The office tower, Raymond's tower. My tower now wasn't a monument anymore. It was a chessboard. And I was finally sitting on the right side of it. Hunter was waiting in the driveway when I pulled in. His tie was loosened, his hair rebellious against the wind. You disappeared, he said. Ellen's been spinning stories all afternoon. Claims you're overwhelmed. Let her think so, I said. It'll make what happens next feel like a magic trick. He followed me inside. Where were you? Tracing ghosts, I said, handing him the photos. Meet my grandmother. And apparently my niece. He looked them over, brows furrowed. You've got his eyes, so they tell me. We sat at the kitchen island, the same one where Ellen had tried to outmaneuver me. The house was quiet, listening again. Hunter, I said, I need you to set up a private audit. Off books. Discreet. I want every shell company that's touched Raymond's accounts in the last 15 years. Follow the cash like it's a blood trail. He nodded. And when we find it, we make examples, I said. Elegant ones. His smile was half admiring, half wary. You're starting to sound like Raymond. I prefer to think I'm what he wished he'd been, I said, unapologetic. The next morning, the press release went out. Dayla Baker confirmed as CEO of Raymond Holdings following board vote. I'd chosen the photo carefully, no pearls, no fake smiles. Just me, standing on the steps of the building, sunlight on my shoulders, eyes unflinching. By noon, every financial rag in the city had an opinion. The consensus. The company was doomed. I read every headline and laughed until I cried. At 3, Ellen called. You're everywhere, she said flatly. Congratulations. Thank you, I said. Just remember, press is fickle. They love a novelty, then they eat it. I'm not a novelty, I said. I'm the new normal. That shut her up. By the end of the week, Hunter's audit started to yield fruit. Small discrepancies, offshore accounts, money siphoned through art investments and fake charities. Every thread led back to the same two names, Peretti and Ellen. Hunter's voice crackled through the phone. They've been bleeding the company for years, he said. Raymond must have suspected but couldn't prove it. He didn't need to prove it, I said. He just needed to leave it to someone who could. Are you ready to play hardball? He asked. I'm done playing, I said. It's time to build a guillotine. That night, I stood on the balcony, wine glass in hand, the city buzzing below. I thought about my son's letter, handwritten, surprisingly honest. He'd confessed his failings, his resentment, his fear of becoming the kind of man his father had been. He wanted a chance, not money. I wasn't sure yet if I believed him, but I kept the letter in my pocket anyway. The wind shifted, bringing the smell of rain and gasoline. It reminded me of something Raymond once said. Power doesn't change people, Dayla. It just lets them stop pretending. I smiled. Well then, I whispered to the night, let's stop pretending. Tomorrow, I would invite Ellen and Peretti to lunch, and I would feed them the truth, one polite bite at a time. I booked the lunch for Friday, neutral territory, downtown, a private room at the Cypress Club. Raymond used to host his annual summit there. Now, the maitre d' nearly tripped over his compliments when I called. Money talks, but power sings. I wore a pale gray suit that said competence with undertones of don't test me. Ellen arrived first. She'd chosen red, predictable. She believed in the color of blood and lipstick as weapons. Peretti followed, looking like a man trying too hard to seem casual. He carried his charm like a bouquet of dying roses. Dayla, he said, all teeth, you're looking radiant. Success suits you. Success doesn't suit, I said, it fits. I gestured for them to sit. I'd arranged the seating so that sunlight hit their faces, not mine. I prefer my opponents squinting. We ordered. Ellen chose salad, Peretti steak. I asked for water, because clarity is best served plain. When the waiter left, I folded my hands on the table. We'll skip the small talk. Hunter's audit is nearly complete. I'm sure you both know what that means. Ellen's lips tightened. Rumors and witch hunts, no doubt. Facts, I corrected. And receipts. The kind that print in red ink. Peretti laughed. Brittle. Now, let's not get dramatic, sweetheart. Say that again, I said softly. He blinked. What? Call me sweetheart again, I said, so I can decide whether to ruin you in public or private. The silence that followed was the kind of silence that lives in courtrooms. He raised his hands. Fine, fine. Look, we all know Raymond's operation wasn't exactly clean. He had arrangements. You can't come in here acting like a saint with a broom. I'm not cleaning, I said. I'm renovating. Ellen took a slow sip of her wine. And what exactly do you want from us, Dayla? A confession? A cut? Revenge? Accountability, I said. And obedience. That got their attention. You're out of your depth, Ellen said finally, her voice low and careful. These are old games, Dayla. You don't have the alliances for this. I smiled. Then I'll build new ones. Peretti leaned forward. And if we don't play along? I slid 2 envelopes across the table. Then I call the SEC, the IRS, the Department of Justice if I'm feeling patriotic. He didn't touch them. What's in here? Options, I said. Option A, you both step down quietly, sign the settlement agreements Hunter prepared, and walk away with your reputations intact. Option B, I release every file Jorge found, every bank record, every offshore transfer, and you both spend the next 5 years explaining yourselves to people who don't accept lunch invitations. Ellen's eyes flicked to the envelopes. This is blackmail. This is justice wearing practical shoes. Peretti swallowed. You think the board will stand behind you when we're gone? I don't need them to stand behind me, I said. They'll follow whoever's moving forward. Ellen pushed back her chair, scraping the floor. You'll regret this. Doubtful, I said. I've regretted worse men than you. She left without another word. Peretti lingered, deflating. You don't understand, he said. Ellen's got connections, real ones. She'll come for you. She'll try, I said. That's how I'll know I'm winning. He hesitated. You could use someone like me. I know the terrain. Peretti, I said. You are the terrain. The kind that collapses when stepped on. Enjoy your steak. When I walked out, Hunter was waiting by the elevator, his expression unreadable. Well? He asked. I offered mercy in a manila envelope, I said. We'll see who's smart enough to take it. He chuckled. You're getting good at this. I've always been good at this, I said. I just never had a stage big enough. The next morning, Ellen resigned. No explanation, no press release, just a one-line email sent at 2:14 a.m. Peretti, ever the survivor, sent a polite note of support and confidence to the board. I almost admired the speed of their self-preservation. Almost. But I knew Ellen wasn't gone. Women like her don't vanish. They regroup. By Friday afternoon, rumors were swirling that I was planning to sell off Raymond Holdings in pieces. False. But strategic lies have a way of revealing who's whispering them. Hunter traced the leak to a boutique PR firm in Miami, one that Ellen had used for years. She's trying to tank your credibility, he said. Paint you as unstable. I laughed. Unstable women change history. We crafted our counterstrike carefully. A series of interviews with select journalists, women who'd been overlooked, underpaid, and were hungry for a story about a 58-year-old CEO who'd risen from housekeeper to empire builder. I didn't sell inspiration. I sold competence. The world ate it up. By Monday, the tide had turned. From mop to magnet, read one headline. The heiress who refuses to sit pretty, said another. For once, I didn't cringe at the attention. I'd earned it. The house felt different now, lighter almost. I'd kept Raymond's office intact but added one small thing, a framed photo of the bakery and silver cross. Beside it, I placed a fresh loaf of bread every Sunday, a small ritual to remind myself where I came from. Mandy called often, usually at night, after her customers left. She told me about new recipes she was trying: pecan rolls, lemon tarts, a bourbon pecan pie that made her mayor's wife forget her diet. You ever gonna visit again? She asked one evening. When I can breathe, I said. You breathing fine, Aunt Dayla. You just forgot how to rest. She wasn't wrong. 3 weeks later, Hunter brought me a new problem. "You're not going to like this," he said, dropping a folder on my desk. "Try me." He opened it. Inside were photos, grainy surveillance stills of my son. Meeting with Ellen. My pulse kicked. When? 2 days ago. Calf near the river. She reached out to him. What did she want? Access, Hunter said. She's been frozen out of the company, but she knows you're sentimental about family. She's betting your son can get through to you. Classic leverage. I stared at the photos. My son, my own flesh, smiling across the table at the woman who'd tried to destroy me. Well, I said finally, let's not keep them waiting. I invited my son to dinner that night. No warning, no explanation, just a short text. 7 o'clock. Bring honesty. He arrived in a borrowed suit, his eyes wary but hopeful. I'd set the table myself, simple. Candlelight, roast chicken, comfort food. He looked around the house as though it belonged to someone else. It's beautiful, he said. It's haunted, I replied. Sit. He did. We ate in silence for a while. I let him have the quiet. It's more effective than any interrogation. Finally, he spoke. I met with Ellen. Good, I said. Then we can skip pretending. She said you're being reckless. That year he hesitated, hurting people who helped you. She's right, I said. But I'm hurting the right people. He frowned. Mom, I just don't want you to get swallowed by this. You've changed. I've expanded. I corrected. Big difference. He sighed. I miss the woman who made cinnamon rolls at a.m. when I couldn't sleep. She's still here, I said. She just knows how to read balance sheets now. He pushed his plate away. She said you could ruin me. Could, I agreed, but won't, unless you force me to. His head snapped up. I'd never, son. I saw the photos, I said. You met her. You smiled. He looked down, ashamed. She said she wanted to make peace. I believed her. Of course you did, I said gently. You believe in people. You got that from me. But you need to learn when to believe and when to watch. He looked up then, and for the first time, I saw the man under the boy. So what now? Now, I said, you tell me everything she said. He did. Every word, every warning, every manipulation. Ellen had told him I was unfit, unstable, that I'd inherited not genius but delusion. She'd suggested he petition the board to take control on my behalf for the good of the company. When he finished, I poured him another glass of wine. You did the right thing telling me, I said. He swallowed. What are you going to do to her? I smiled. Teach her that underestimating a woman over 50 is a fatal error. He tried to smile back, uncertain whether to be proud or afraid. Maybe both. After he left, I called Hunter. It's time, I said. For what? For the lesson. The next morning, I released a statement to the press. Former executive Ellen Rourke accused of financial misconduct. Full cooperation with authorities pledged by CEO Dayla Baker. Hunter called me within minutes. You sure about this? Absolutely, I said. Let the world see what happens when betrayal meets preparation. That evening, as the city's headlines screamed Ellen's name, I sat on my balcony again, sipping wine and listening to the hum of consequence. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled. I smiled. It wasn't a storm coming. It was me. The morning the papers broke the story, I was up before dawn, sitting on the edge of the bed with a calmness I hadn't felt in years. The sun hadn't yet decided whether to rise, and I already knew the day would split someone's life in two. Ellen's face was everywhere: news feeds, financial columns, even gossip blogs that didn't usually care about people who wore suits instead of sequins. Former CFO of Raymond Holdings under investigation for fraud. She'd called it a misunderstanding. They always did. I didn't gloat. Not yet. Justice, I've learned, doesn't need applause, it needs patience. Hunter showed up at 7, half out of breath, with a grin that belonged to a man who had just outrun his conscience. You did it, he said. The board's in emergency mode. They're calling you the Iron Widow. Sounds like a cocktail, I said. I might trademark it. He dropped into a chair. You realize she'll fight back? Of course, I said. It's what I'd do. And she did. Within 24 hours, Ellen's attorney had filed a countersuit accusing me of defamation and abuse of power. Her press statement dripped with sanctimony. I've spent my career supporting women in leadership. I refuse to be vilified by one who has lost her way. I laughed so hard I scared the housekeeper. Supporting women? Ellen had eaten women like me for breakfast, one spoonful at a time, polite smile intact. Hunter tried to sound calm, but his jaw tightened. She's spinning this as a feminist feud. The press loves that narrative. Then we give them a better one, I said. The story of a woman who refused to clean up quietly. That night, I drove out to Raymond's old country property, what used to be his weekend escape before the city swallowed him whole. I needed air that didn't smell like litigation. The gate creaked as I pushed it open. The house was empty now, just stone and silence and ghosts. He'd loved that place. A man needs somewhere to hear himself, he once told me. City noise makes you forget what your own thoughts sound like. I stood by the pond where we used to feed the ducks. It was still, except for one stubborn ripple that refused to disappear. I thought of Raymond and what he'd left me, his empire, his guilt, and now, his enemies. He hadn't chosen me because I was kind. He'd chosen me because I was relentless. You wanted a legacy, I whispered. You're getting one. By Monday, I was back in the war room, my office, now rearranged for battle. On the wall, a map of connections, Ellen's allies, Peretti's shell companies, board members who needed convincing, journalists who owed me favors. It looked like the mind of a spider. Mandy called while I was studying it. You look tired, she said. No hello. You can see through the phone now? Through your voice, she said. It's got that edge. The one that sounds like you're about to eat someone. Maybe I am. Just remember, she said, wolves don't eat every rabbit they see. They pick the fattest one. I smiled. Noted. That afternoon, Hunter came in holding a flash drive like it was a live grenade. You need to see this. He plugged it into my laptop and opened a folder titled Rourke Communications. Hundreds of emails, all from Ellen's company account, messages between her and a firm that specialized in corporate espionage. They'd been intercepting internal memos, even tracking my schedule. She was spying on me? I asked, though it wasn't really a question. More than that, Hunter said. She was trying to leak your private correspondence to the press. And your son's emails too. My chest tightened. My son? She wanted to show him as your weak point, he said. To paint you as a manipulative mother who abandoned her family for power. I stood, pacing. So she's going after blood now. Hunter's expression was grim. Dayla, we can shut this down quietly. We already have enough to bury her in court. But if we go public with these, it'll destroy her completely. Good, I said. Think carefully, he said. There's no coming back from that. You win, but it'll cost you your peace. Hunter, I said, leaning against the desk. I stopped running peace the day my husband walked out. You don't win wars with silence, you win them with precision. He hesitated, then nodded. Then I'll prepare the statement. That night, I called my son. He picked up on the second ring. Mom, I have something to tell you, I said. Ellen's been using you. He went quiet. I know. I froze. You know, she called again yesterday. Said she wanted to help me protect the family name. I didn't believe her this time. Relief and pride wrestled inside me. I'm glad you didn't. She said you'd turn me against myself. I laughed, sharp and dry. She's right. I will if the part of you she wants is still gullible. He didn't laugh. Mom, when does it end? You're not sleeping. You're not living. What happens after you win? After I win? I said softly. Then I start building. Building what? Something that doesn't belong to men like Raymond and Ellen and Peretti. Something that has my name on the door. He was quiet for a long time. If you ever need help, he said, real help, I'm here. It was the first time in years he'd said that without resentment in his voice. Maybe I do, I said. But first I need you to trust me. I do, he said. Now, when we hung up, I realized that trust was the one currency Ellen couldn't counterfeit. The next morning, I called a press conference. Hunter nearly dropped his phone when I told him. Are you sure you want to do this live? He asked. I want the world to see what happens when a woman stops apologizing. By noon, the conference room was packed, journalists, cameras, even board members pretending they just happened to be nearby. I stood behind the podium, calm, almost amused. Good afternoon, I began. I've been accused of many things this week: ambition, arrogance, vengeance. All true, depending on your angle. But there's one thing I'm not guilty of, and that's silence. Flashbulbs popped like fireworks. I gestured to the screen behind me. This company has been betrayed from within. Funds stolen, trust eroded. Today, we make that right. Hunter clicked the remote. The screen filled with emails, dates, amounts, signatures. The kind of truth that doesn't need adjectives. I continued. The individuals responsible will face justice. And to those who believe I can't lead because I once cleaned these floors, let me remind you, I know every inch of this building, every bolt and beam. You can't destroy a house when the woman who built it still holds the keys. The room erupted applause, questions, flashes. I walked out before any of them could catch their breath. That evening, I found an envelope taped to my office door. No return address. Inside, a single line of handwritten script. You're not done with me yet. No signature. But I didn't need one. Ellen, she wasn't running. She was regrouping. And somewhere out there, she was planning her next move. I poured a glass of Scotch Raymond's brand and raised it to the ceiling. All right, darling, I said to the ghost of my former boss. The game's still on. But this time, I play all the sides. The house creaked in response, like it approved. I sipped, sat back, and smiled. Ellen wanted a war? She'd just declared it on the wrong woman. The next few weeks felt like living inside a chessboard where every piece whispered threats. The press had calmed down, Ellen had vanished from sight, and the board was suddenly very polite to me to polite. That's the kind of silence you get before someone lights the fuse. Hunter was cautious. She's regrouping. We've cut off her official TIs, but she still has influence friends, favors, old debts. You don't just erase 20 years of handshakes. I don't intend to, I said. I intend to make those hands shake for real. He sighed. You're enjoying this too much. I'm not enjoying it, I said. I'm perfecting it. But he wasn't wrong. There was a thrill in control, a sharp, addictive satisfaction in steering the storm instead of sheltering from it. I'd been underestimated for so long that power felt like oxygen. Still, I didn't sleep well. Too many dreams of doors opening on empty rooms, of Raymond's voice saying, "You don't win by burning everything down, Dayla. You win by choosing what to rebuild." I'd wake before dawn and sit by the window, coffee in hand, watching the city pulse. Power glitters at that hour, just before the world wakes to claim it. Then one morning, Hunter burst in, phone in hand. "You need to see this." He turned the screen toward me. Ellen was on it, an interview. Live from somewhere in Europe. The Chiron read, "Former CFO speaks out, the real story behind Dayla Baker." I muted the sound before she could start spinning her poison. I didn't need her words. I knew the rhythm already. Betrayed, misunderstood, victimized. She'd always had a talent for rearranging guilt into self-pity, but it wasn't her face that stopped me, it was the backdrop. Behind her, clear as glass, hung a painting, one of Raymond's, his favorite, the one that had hung in his study for years, a coastal landscape that had never left the house. How the hell I began. Hunter zoomed in. That painting was cataloged as part of the estate. It shouldn't have gone anywhere. Unless she took it before he died, I said. Or someone gave it to her. I stood up. Call the gallery he used. Find out if she's been selling his pieces. He nodded, already dialing. While he made calls, I pulled up every file we had on Raymond's art collection. Half a dozen paintings had been quietly donated or loaned to private collectors in the last few months of his life, transactions signed off by someone using his digital signature. Ellen, I whispered. Of course. Hunter ended his call. The gallery says 3 of the paintings turned up in Zurich last month, under an anonymous seller's account. Same art broker Ellen's used before. I smiled without humor. Then I think it's time I booked a flight. Zurich was clean in the way wealth likes to be, quietly smug, smelling of snow and secrecy. I arrived unannounced at the broker's office. He was a man who believed in silk TIs and plausible deniability. "Madam Baker," he said smoothly, rising to shake my hand. "What an unexpected honor." "Not as unexpected as what you've been selling," I said. "You've been moving pieces that belong to me." He tried to look surprised. "I assure you, we deal only with verified owners." "Then your verification system is either corrupt or incompetent," I said. "Which one would you prefer me to report?" He hesitated. "Perhaps there has been a misunderstanding. Perhaps," I said, "you'd like to clear it up before the Swiss authorities misunderstand your tax filings." That did it. Within an hour, I had names, invoices, and a shipping record. All trails led to one account registered in Monaco under a holding company named Roque Enterprises. Ellen Rourke had simply removed a letter from her own name and thought herself clever. "Subtle as ever," I muttered. Hunter was on the next flight out to meet me. We sat in a cafe across from the broker's office, planning our next move. "She's laundering money through art," he said. "Classic tactic. Easy to inflate, easy to hide. We can freeze the assets once we tie her name to the account." "Let's not freeze them," I said. "Let's buy them." He looked at me like I'd grown horns. "Buy them?" "Yes, through a front. I'll pay her to sell me back my own legacy. Then when the transaction clears, we trace the payment and hand the entire web to the authorities. She won't just lose the money, she'll lose the illusion of cleverness. Hunter shook his head slowly. That's diabolical. It's efficient, I said, and poetic. 2 weeks later, the trap was set. My front buyer, a discreet woman named Margot with a voice made of velvet and lies, negotiated with Ellen's broker. Ellen agreed to the sale immediately. She was desperate for liquidity. The investigation in the States had frozen her accounts. When the transfer cleared, we followed the trail to an offshore bank in Monaco. Within hours, Hunter had coordinated with financial authorities. The freeze orders went out. Ellen's empire, built on stolen art and arrogance, collapsed overnight. The next morning, my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. Enjoy your victory, Dayla. Ellen's voice was brittle, edged with exhaustion. Very much, I said. Thank you for making it so easy. You think you've won, she said. But you've only proven one thing, that you're your father's daughter. I almost laughed. Finally, a compliment. You'll end up like him, she hissed. Alone, surrounded by people who want what you have, not who you are. Maybe, I said. But the difference between Raymond and me is that I already know it. And I'm not afraid to make them pay admission. She went quiet for a moment. Then, you don't scare me. You should, I said, and hung up. When I returned to the States, I stopped at the bakery in Silver Cross before going home. The smell hit me like a memory: flour, butter, sugar, and something warmer. Mandy looked up from behind the counter, flour dusting her cheeks. You look different, she said. I am, I said. Lighter. She wiped her hands. So it's over? Almost, I said. But the worst part's done. I took back what was ours. She nodded. And what'll you do with it? Something Raymond never did, I said. I'll give it away carefully. She laughed. You always did have your own kind of justice. Justice with frosting, I said, and we both grinned. When I finally returned to the city, the house felt different again, not haunted, just settled. I poured a glass of wine and sat by the window. Hunter came by later with papers in hand. Ellen's accounts are officially frozen, he said. Interpol's involved now. She won't be coming back anytime soon. Good, I said. I was getting tired of her perfume. He handed me another envelope. What's this? I asked. Your son, he said. He sent it to my office. Said you'd read it when you were ready. I opened it carefully. Inside was a letter and a photo of him with his kids, my grandchildren, standing in front of a playground. In the letter, he wrote about forgiveness, not asking for it, but offering it. I understand now why you had to be tough, Mom. You weren't breaking things. You were clearing space. I felt something warm crack open in my chest. Not guilt, not regret, something quieter, relief. I put the photo on my desk, next to Raymond's portrait. 2 families, one past, one future. Hunter poured himself a glass of my wine. So, he said, what now? Now, I said, we build. He raised his glass. To what? To women who stop waiting for permission, I said. We clinked glasses, the sound small but certain. Outside, the city lights blinked like knowing eyes. Somewhere far away, Ellen was probably pacing a hotel room, cursing my name, realizing she'd lost to a woman who used to dust her office. I smiled into my wine. Checkmate, I whispered. But even as the word left my lips, I knew it wasn't the end. There was still one thing I hadn't done, one promise to keep, one truth to face. Raymond's last letter had mentioned one more secret, locked away in a safety deposit box only I could open. And tomorrow, I would find out what it was. The next morning, I woke with that odd, electric feeling, the one that hums through you right before life changes shape again. The city was half asleep outside my window, but my thoughts were already racing toward that safety deposit box. It had been there since before Raymond's death, Hunter told me. He left instructions for it in a sealed envelope, only to be opened once you'd officially taken control of the company. Why not sooner? I'd asked. Hunter had looked uneasy. He said you needed to see who you really were before you saw what he'd hidden. At 9 o'clock sharp, we met at the First National Bank downtown, a building old enough to remember when money had a conscience. The manager led us down a narrow corridor lined with numbered doors. Each one looked the same: quiet, discreet, conspiratorial. Raymond's box was at the end. 3127. The number meant nothing to me, but I ran my fingers over the cool metal anyway. It felt like the door to a memory. The manager left us alone. Hunter turned the key, then stepped back, letting me open it myself. Inside was a single black leather folder and a small velvet pouch. I took them both to the little side table, the kind meant for signing documents that rewrite lives. The folder contained letters, dozens of them, all written in Raymond's precise, slanted hand. They were addressed to me. The first one begins simply, "Dayla, if you're reading this, it means you've survived the wolves and possibly become one yourself. Good. The world doesn't need more lambs." I laughed through a tear. That was Raymond, part confession, part sermon, part challenge. He went on, "But there's something you need to know. I didn't just find you by chance. I've been looking for you for years. And I didn't do it alone." My pulse quickened. I turned to the next page. Hunter knew. He helped me. I froze. Hunter, standing quietly by the door, must have sensed it. "Keep reading," he said softly. The next letter explained everything. Raymond had suspected that someone within the company, Ellen, of course, was planning to sell off his assets. He knew he didn't have long to live, and he wanted to make sure his legacy didn't rot in her hands. So he'd reached out to a private investigator to find the daughter he'd abandoned decades ago. He hadn't trusted anyone else, not his board, not his partners, but he had trusted one man to find me, Hunter. I looked up at him. "You knew all along," he nodded, guilt flickering across his usually steady face. "I did. He made me promise not to tell you until the time was right. You needed to come to him without knowing. He wanted to see who you were before he handed you the keys." I folded the letter closed, fighting the mix of betrayal and understanding. "So every conversation, every kindness was that duty?" He stepped closer. "It was both. At first, duty. But later," he stopped, searching for words that didn't sound like excuses. "Later, it was respect. You made him proud, Dayla. You made me proud." The anger faded as quickly as it had come. Hunter had been the bridge between us, the unseen hand that set my life back on its rails. "Thank you," I said quietly. He nodded once. I turned back to the velvet pouch and loosened the drawstring. Inside was a locket, old gold, scratched at the edges. Inside, a photo of a young woman holding a baby. My mother, me. On the back was an engraving. "Forgive the man who learned too late." I pressed the locket into my palm, feeling the weight of all those lost years settle into something softer. For the first time in months, maybe years, I let myself breathe without armor. That night, I sat on the balcony with a bottle of wine, the letters spread across the table like tarot cards. The city below was alive with lights and traffic, but I felt still, whole. Mandy called, her voice bright and teasing as ever. "You sound different." "I am," I said. "I think I finally finished something." "Good," she said. "Now start something new." "I might," I said. "Raymond Holdings is going to change its name." "To what?" "Baker Industries," I said, "in honor of the woman who baked her way through heartbreak and raised a daughter strong enough to clean an empire and then run it." She laughed. "Now that's branding." 2 months later, the company was reborn. I walked through the new offices, sleeker, brighter, filled with faces that didn't look like the old boys club that had once run the place. We launched a mentorship program for women over 40, those who'd been told they were past their prime. I called it the second act. The press called me a visionary. I just called it overdue. Ellen was still overseas, fighting extradition. The last I heard, she'd lost her lawyer and most of her pride. Peretti had vanished into the fog of retirement, fine by me. My son visited one Saturday, his children in tow. They ran through the hallways of my house like they owned the place, which was exactly what I wanted. He watched them with a quiet smile. "You're happier," he said. "I'm finished with ghosts," I replied. He hesitated, then asked, "Do you forgive him, Raymond?" I looked at the locket around my neck. "I think so. He tried to make things right in the only way he knew. And I've spent enough years hating men who didn't know better. That's not strength, that's stagnation." He nodded. "You're a better person than I am." "Not better," I said. "Just older. Age makes you ruthless about what deserves your peace." The night before the first board meeting under the new name, I walked alone through the city. People passed me without recognition, and I liked it that way. I was nobody and everybody, a woman who had been made, mother, daughter, CEO, an avenger. At a street corner, I saw a young woman juggling groceries and exhaustion, a toddler clinging to her leg. She looked exactly like I once had. I helped her pick up the bag she dropped. "You're doing fine," I told her. She gave me a tired smile. "I don't feel fine." "You don't have to feel it yet," I said. "Just keep moving. Feeling follows action." She laughed. "That's good advice." It's expensive, I said, winking. You'll owe me one day. As I walked away, I realized that maybe that was my real inheritance, not the company, not the money, not even the redemption, but the fire. The stubborn, unkillable kind of fire that women pass to each other in dark times, saying, "Here, take this. You'll need it." At sunrise, I stood before the glass tower that now bore the name Baker Industries. My name, my mother's name. Hunter joined me at the entrance, 2 cups of coffee in hand. "Ready?" he asked. I smiled. I was born ready. I just needed the world to catch up. We walked inside. And as the doors closed behind me, I thought of Raymond, the lonely man who died trying to fix his mistakes, and of the daughter who learned that the best revenge wasn't destruction, it was legacy. "Thank you, old man," I whispered. "You taught me how to steer the ship." The elevator chimed. The doors opened to a new floor, a new day, a new life. I stepped out, heels clicking against marble, and smiled at the world I had rebuilt from dust. The cleaning lady had become the captain, and the empire was finally clean.